Today we are continuing the celebration of the release of Nightwish's new album Yesterwind by doing a comprehensive Nightwish album ranking. If you don't know me, my name is Oha Cade. I'm the composer for the symphonic metal project Valcada. You can check out our music in the description. This will of course be my personal album ranking, just my opinion. I've decided that instead of going through them in chronological order, I'll put them through a randomizer and do them in random order. I think this is a fun idea because it's more challenging to rank an album in relation to one that could be from a different era rather than always ranking the album in relation to the one that came just before it. However, we will leave Yesterwind for the very end, as that is the ultimate question really, is where the new album sits. So the first album up for discussion is Century Child. An interesting first album to discuss for sure, as it sits like right in the middle of their journey in a way. It was the first album to feature live strings and orchestra, and that was a big step for them. It resulted in quite a big change for their sound. One of their darkest, I would say, if not the darkest. Moody, broody, lots of melancholy atmospheres and melancholy themes. Unrequited love, the loss of innocence. Really deep. This album has such a distinct vibe going for it, and I find that to be such a beautiful thing. Some of their most iconic songs come from this album, most notably Everdream, Bless the Child, Slaying the Dreamer, and maybe my personal favourite, Beauty of the Beast. An absolutely outstanding, underrated epic from them. Please, Nightwish, bring this one back into the live setlist. I would die. The album does have some filler, and I am referring to the 3-track stretch of Forever Yours, Ocean Soul, and Feel For You. And these are, of course, very enjoyable songs. Quite good songs, in fact. But in comparison to the high quality of the other tracks on the album, this is a very long 3-track stretch that is notably not as memorable as the rest of the material. And I think that's a long time on an album to not be dishing out the bangers. So I'm feeling sort of an A-tier situation for now. One last comment I'll make about it is that the infusion of Marco's vocals was extremely well done. Considering it was his first album with the band, it just sounded like he had been with them forever. So the chemistry was off the charts with Tarja. And it's no surprise that they're still touring together to this day. It was kind of meant to be, wasn't it? The next album we're going to discuss is Oceanborn. I've had such a personally chaotic journey with this album. It used to be one of my least favorites, but over the years, I've really come to appreciate how hungry the band sounded to prove themselves as legendary musicians. And that passion, that hunger, is bleeding out from every single note. It really set the standard for what fans were to expect from them moving forward. It has probably my favorite guitar work. The guitar licks are complex, melodic, rhythmical, so catchy, so intense, emotional. The solos are insane. In a way, it's Empu's album largely, and I do believe in these earlier albums, Empu had more of a hand in writing, and it really made a difference here. Tarja's vocals were not quite refined at this point, but she still sounds incredible, despite the fact that she did have some difficulty recording this album, and I believe she said this herself, that recording these songs was very challenging. These vocal melodies were nuts, but in my opinion, it paid off. We have a legendary album here with very little filler. I do have some tracks that I'm not as fond of, but even in those tracks, I find a lot to enjoy. For example, The Riddler, and then we have other crazy songs like The Pharaoh Sails to Orion. That is one of their best songs ever, in my opinion. Absolutely love that track. So dark, almost avant-garde in a way. They were trying a lot of different stuff, and it all hit. It was a bullseye. It's hard for me to find any other serious criticisms with this record, so this one is going in S tier. Next, we have Imaginarum. Imaginarum was truly an imaginative work. I love that there was a core concept to tie all the songs together. It was a departure from some of the more dark and heavy themes of the albums that came before it. The band were exploring a more colourful sound is how I would describe it, with a good variety of atmospheres. For example, the jazzy Slow Love Slow. Then you have the folky I Want My Tears Back. the more devilish Tim Burton-esque scare tale. So many twists and turns to enjoy, similar to a roller coaster, you know what I mean? Like the theme is totally coming together. Thoroughly enjoyable. It's a fan favourite. Many would say it's their best. I wouldn't quite agree. While some songs have immense staying power for me, for example, Ghost River, like I said, Scare Tale, Turn Loose the Mermaids, there's a few songs on here that I'm not too eager to return to. For example, Last Ride of the Day, which is a fun song, but maybe it's because this song is so overplayed in their concerts that I just can't ever see myself putting on this song. Song of Myself is also, too long. The extended spoken word part at the end of the album is certainly a choice. I see the vision for sure, and there's very touching quotes in that section that make me well up. But there's also a lot of other quotes that don't have very good delivery, like from people who are not professional voice actors, like random members of the band, and it just doesn't work for me really. And also I think the vocals on this album could have done with more finessing. Like there are some vocal takes that you hear and they might be a little bit off key, or the delivery wasn't quite nailed. And it all made sense to me when I read or heard a quote in an interview from Tuomas where he said that they kind of shot from the hip a little bit and often they would use only the first or second vocal take. And I do respect that approach, but it is a feeling that I can't really shake when I listen to some of the songs. For example, Rest Calm and the climax of Slow Love Slow when Annette does her improvised vocalizations. I think that climax would have been more impactful with a more well thought out vocal line than an improvised one. Just my taste. But we're really getting into the weeds here. I'll get to the point, which is where do I think this album sits? I'm really struggling between this one and Century Child. I am going to put this ahead of Century Child because at no point in Imaginarium do I feel like I'm listening to filler. It's a very consistent quality. Even if some parts aren't to my taste, at least the imagination is there. Next we have Once, coming in hot. Well. I cannot say enough good things about this album. This was the second album with a live orchestra, but I believe it was the first with a live choir and with Pip Williams's arrangement and orchestration. Just absolutely mind-blowing. Once I had a dream, and this is it. Like, are you kidding me? How sick is that? So straight from the first few seconds, you are thrown into this mind-blowing journey of imagination, fantasy, passion, power, darkness. And all of that is really contained in the first song alone, Dark Chest of Wonders, an utter classic of their discography, and in my opinion, contender for the best song they ever wrote. If not in their top 5 or top 10. Definitely top 5. And the variety on this album is just staggering. Wish I Had an Angel is an unexpected switch up into a sort of industrial dance, but I think they executed it perfectly. I'm surprised they didn't pursue this style more in the following albums, really. And then another classic banger, Nemo, Planet Hell, Creek Mary's Blood. Such a moving tale about the harrowing genocide of the Native American people. Despite the controversy surrounding, I think his name is John Two Hawks. You can look up that controversy, but I just choose to ignore it because the song itself is so tender and beautiful and sincere. The Siren, yet another stylistic switch up, and every song on this album is quite distinct, but as a whole package, it's really quite perfect. Needless to say, Ghost Love Score is on this album. I think the studio version of this track is quite underrated because you get to hear all of the orchestral details that you might not catch in a live version. I guess the only track that maybe I could understand being seen as filler is Dead Gardens, but again, like, the extended heavy outro of this song is so inventive. Kualema Teke Taitelian is a slow orchestral ballad that doesn't drag, it doesn't go on for too long. It's a compact, elegant piece. Tarja's vocals on this album are so refined and emotive. The production is on point. Everything hits. In my opinion, it is potentially their best album, but I'm still undecided about that. For now, it certainly is ahead of Oceanborn. S tier status without a doubt. The next album is Angels Fall First. I don't think it's going to come as a complete shocker to any of you that we have our first C-tier placement in this case. Just going to get that out of the way. This album wasn't even intended to be an album. It was actually crafted with the intention of it being a demo. So largely the performances and the mixing on it are a little unpolished. But that said, there's a lot to enjoy. Beauty and the Beast in particular is a gorgeous track, progressive. And that groove towards the end always gets me. But all of the performances across the board, including Tarja, are just kind of fine, but leaving a lot to be desired, of course, as this was their first venture. Everything was still being figured out. Again, some strong songs, Astral Romance, Tutankhamun, No Way the Nightingale Sings. It's fine, but in comparison to their later stuff, does not hold a candle. I think we can all agree on that. Next, we have Human Nature. To summarize, I think the production on this album was really excellent. It's an album that sounds great. Everything is quite clear. Floor's vocals are front and center, which we love. I also really love how the first half of the album uses synth samples rather than a real orchestra, because it gives us that nostalgic quality of their earlier albums. The songs have a cool progressive streak in them, but also a little overindulgent and neglecting of catchiness and memorability. It really is one of those records that is so divisive that I hear fans tell me it's their favorite. I hear fans tell me it's their least favorite. Shoemaker is, of course, the big classic, and we absolutely love that song. And I have no real objection to most of the other songs. I think it's a perfectly enjoyable Nightwish release, but I suppose it never really reached that iconic status for me like a lot of their other releases did. We also had a severe lack of Marco on the album, too much Troy, and the real quote-unquote nail in the coffin for me was All the Works of Nature That Adorn the World. Now, I'm a big fan of Tuomas's orchestral writing. The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck is a really amazing piece of work, but All the Works of Nature is so focused on a sort of scory, chordal, atmospheric, cinematic style that it lacks a lot of distinct melodies and interest and dynamics, and comes across to me like background music rather than something I care to sit down and really get sucked into. Yes, of course, it has its standout moments, like Ad Astra, amazing, stunning, beautiful, of course. But for this song to be, how long is it? Just over 30 minutes, and to be so slow and kind of plod along like that is just taking the liberties too far for my own taste. Therefore, you can probably guess that this album is going towards the end. In fact, I'd put it in C tier alongside Angels Fall First, just ahead of it. And yes, of course, Human Nature is leagues ahead of Angels Fall First. They're not even remotely in the same league, but we gotta keep in mind the other albums that we still have to discuss. Next is Wishmaster. Wishmaster might have my favorite mixing from them ever. It's such an inviting album to listen to sonically. Everything sounds so warm and pleasant to your ears. You just want to jump right in. They nailed the drum production. They nailed the position for Tarja's voice in the mix. So clear, so resonant, so ethereal. Her performance on this album might be my favorite performance from her ever also. It's right in that sweet spot where she's overcome the difficulty with singing Nightwish vocal melodies. And it's before she really started experimenting with her, I guess, more speech level singing or full voice. Like, if you're a fan of Tarja's head voice, the operatic lyrical style, this really is the album for you. The emotion from her, just the way she totally owns the songs and really is the star of the show, makes me so happy. Compositionally, this album is excellent and very consistent too. Classics like She Is My Sin, Wishmaster, another song that I think could potentially be in their top 5 songs ever, if not their top 10. Dead Boy's Poem. I mean, my God. Are you for real? Like, this material is so good, so legendary. And even though some of the more obscure tracks like Deep Silent Complete, Phantasmic, and Wanderlust are not in the larger fan conversation. You can't really deny the magic that comes over you when you hear those songs. Tuomas actually doesn't find this album to be one of their strongest. To him, it's more of an Oceanborn 2.0. I would have to strongly disagree. While I can see that point of view from the composer himself, I would look at it more as a beautifully refined evolution from Oceanborn. It was the first Nightwish album I ever heard, so I owe my obsession with the band to this album largely. The question for me is if it's better than Oceanborn or not. I might have to put my bias aside here and give the edge to Oceanborn. So Wishmaster is going in A tier, ahead of Imaginarium and Century Child. Even though Wishmaster is amazing and has more refined production than Oceanborn, I have to give the edge to Oceanborn, as I just can't argue with the youthful, zesty life and vibrant energy that I get from Oceanborn. The next album is Dark Passion Play, the successor to Once. They had a lot to prove, especially after the departure of Tarja and with the introduction of Annette. They knocked this album out of the park 100%. This work is just unlike anything that exists in the world. Opening with the Poet and the Pendulum, like who does that? What a statement. There is no filler on this album. Even though it's so long, I don't find it to be bloated. I find every moment to be critical, crucial, big part of the story. Again, such a broad range of styles. I love the crushing heaviness of Master Passion Greed. Amaranth was a brilliant, catchy single. Annette's vocal performance honestly blew my mind on this album. I couldn't get over how much she made Nightwish's sound her own. And I do prefer her performance on this album to her performance on Imaginarium. It seemed like she put more care into her vocal takes on this one, and it really paid off. Even the songs that you could consider filler on this, maybe Eva, Whoever Brings the Night, or For the Heart I Once Had, these are really great tracks. If they were released on their own EP, I don't think anyone would be mad. What's cool is that Empu wrote Whoever Brings the Night exclusively by himself. And I don't know how accurate that is, but that's how he's credited. I do feel like some of the parts in this song are very Tuomas-y, which makes me feel like Tuomas had his finger in the pie a little bit. But if this is the strong material that Empu can write, I don't know why we didn't get more of his influence in later albums. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe from this album on, Tuomas wrote pretty much everything exclusively. Can we also talk about the B-sides? Escapist, The Heart Asks Pleasure First. We were not left hungry. They fed us to completion. And then finishing the album with the heavenly and majestic Meadows of Heaven with that insane gospel choir climax. Are you kidding me? I have no words, truly. So in my opinion, Dark Passion Play and Once are neck and neck for the number one spot. And I personally go back and forth on it a lot. That said, I still think Once takes it, if for no other reason than it is more compact. It's a lot of quality material in lesser time, but like I said, I really could go either way. I feel comfortable leaving Once in first place for now though, and we might revisit at the end of the video. And of course, the last album to discuss before we get to Yesterwind is Endless Form's Most Beautiful, the first album with Floriansen, and my general feeling is that it's a solid record. Good songwriting, consistent the whole way through. The highs are very high. Shudder Before the Beautiful is this mind-blowing crash to open the album with, really let you know that they're back with so much celestial energy. The Greatest Show on Earth becoming one of their most iconic songs ever. A hugely experimental piece that paid off immensely and certainly went towards their rise to a new level of fame in recent years. I really feel like they owe a lot of their success to this album alone, which is interesting because it came so late in their career, but it certainly took them to the next level thanks to the strong writing and thanks to Flora's vocals, especially live. However, even though this album is solid, there's something about it that just strikes me as a little bit safe and comfortable for them, as opposed to an album like Once, where every single song jumps out at me in different angles in its own way. Endless Forms Most Beautiful is more restrained in its sound. The songs sound more like each other. And again, this could be a matter of taste, but I do remember when I was first digesting this album, I was really missing the variety of even Imaginarum, where there was a unique spirit to each track. Like Weak Fantasy, Yours is an Empty Hope, the title track, Endless Forms Most Beautiful. It's a lot of the same sound, a slight variation on the same sound. But like I said, enjoyable enough, solid. The breakdown in the title track, Endless Forms Most Beautiful, actually is one of my favourite moments. And even my lesser favourite songs, such as My Walden and Our Decades in the Sun, are perfectly enjoyable tracks. And I did wear this album out, don't get me wrong. But the wow factor just wasn't there at the time, and it's still not there for me all these years later, except for the standout songs, particularly Shut Up Before the Beautiful and The Greatest Show on Earth. And there is that injustice regarding Sagan not being included on the track list and still not being on streaming services for us to enjoy. Like, come on. How did that song get left off? I mean, I can see maybe they thought it sounded sonically too much alike Elan, but I don't know. Like, to me, you could space them out on the track list a little bit to alleviate that. Oh, I really think they should have fit this song in the album. It's such a great song, and I do hope they perform it live one day. All that said, this is B tier, for the reasons I just gave. Now we're getting into the good stuff, the real business. Yesterwind. I have covered this album extensively since its release. I did a full reaction video, a lyrics analysis, and a review. The links are in the description. I'll do my best to not repeat myself too much from my review, but generally I found the album to be really strong. It certainly holds its own. I am not a fan of the production and mixing. There's a lot of bloating in the track list. The writing on some of the vocal melodies are questionable, where there's too many lyrics being fit in here, and it's funny because you're gonna make Flor sing so many words and then mix her down so low that it's hard to tell what she's saying. But the performances are really breathtaking. The orchestration is next level. I have a big contention with Troy's vocals, and I may have been a little harsh in my review about that. I do apologize if I came across as disrespectful. That's not how it was intended. And in reading your comments, I realized that a lot of people do appreciate his voice. They think it offers a nice contrast to Flor's. Honestly, that's still not how I see it, but I totally hear that not everyone hears it the way I do. I also find the flow of the album, the order of the tracks, the peaks and valleys, to be the most jarring out of any Nightwish album to date. And I'm still finding it hard to get used to that. But in terms of emotional impact, I have to say that out of the 3 Flor albums, at least to me, this is the strongest and most impactful. There's a lot of heart that comes from this music when I listen. There's a lot of heart-wrenching moments, tight musicianship, unexpectedly delightful guitar parts too. And I believe this album has a lot of potential for me to love it more and more as time goes on, in a way that Human Nature or Endless Forms Most Beautiful might have been limited. So the fair spot that I see in the Nightwish ranking is in B tier, just ahead of Endless Forms Most Beautiful. I cannot with good conscience put it ahead of a killer record like Century Child, but its strengths are readily apparent to me and are enough to bump it ahead of the albums below it, despite some of my personal misgivings. I'm looking at this ranking and I'm asking myself, is there anything I would change around? The only thing that I'm kind of doubting is I'm almost inclined to put Century Child ahead of Imaginarum, but I think I'll hold my horses and keep it as is. I think this is a solid ranking, so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. What would your ranking be? Do you feel like my assessment of every album was fair? Please share anything that comes to mind in the comments. And lastly, be sure to check out all of my other Nightwish content. Again, my name is Ohak Cade. I'm the composer for the symphonic metal project Valcata. You can check out our music in the description too. I'm also on Patreon if you fancy some exclusive content and the opportunity to request a song review for my YouTube shorts. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Actually, there's one thing I will do, and it's this, okay? I just realized that I was making it seem as if Human Nature and Angels Fall First are somehow in the same league, and they're not at all. So that final adjustment was totally necessary. All right, see you later.